The original Shantae released on the Game Boy Color all the way back in 2002. Backed by huge publisher Capcom, the game received pretty critical praise, but ended up selling incredibly poorly since it released after the Game Boy Advance had already come out. WayForward would then go on to develop a sequel for the Game Boy Advance, but were unable to find a publisher. So they shelved that project, and that's where it sat for over 20 years. Now in 2025, that game is finally available thanks to developer WayForward Technologies and publishing partner Limited Run Games, which I know what you're thinking because I'm thinking the exact same thing. Man, Limited Run, really? Well, yeah, but every now and again they do something that's pretty cool, and this is definitely one of those things. And although I don't really support Limited Run very much now, I do support everything WayForward does, and they are one of my absolute favorite developers. So I will swallow my pride and support them in any way that I can. So when this game originally released back in April for the Game Boy Advance, I was excited to play it and dove right in. But prior to playing it, I had two thoughts in my head. First, how is this game gonna stack up to the rest of the Shantae series? It's come a long way in 20 years. And then second, is my concern from question number one going to affect my enjoyment of this game? Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it, so that's what I'm here to share with you. But first and foremost, let's get into the story, which is exactly what you would expect. The dastardly Risky Boots is after Sequin Land once again, looking to take it over and plunder all of its riches, all while dealing with everyone's favorite half-genie hero, Shantae. That's going to be how Risky's Revolution opens up. It's very familiar, it works, there's a lot of humor, it will immediately introduce you to all of your favorite characters from the series. You're going to see Sky and Bolo, and Shantae's uncle, of course, and the mayor, and then everyone's favorite zombie, Roddy Tops. A lot of the story and gameplay is centered around the mechanic that's introduced by Risky's plan, and that's to use a device called the Tremor Engine to rotate a King's Pillar, which is a massive stone column supporting the entire continent. And what this does is it introduces a gameplay mechanic where the surface is rotated. So two areas are going to be flip-flopped, and then you're going to have to work your way towards rearranging these into the correct orientation. And this is a gameplay mechanic that at times introduced a lot of confusion for me, because the areas look pretty similar when they're switched, and since it's easy to overlook something and to feel lost, I did find myself wandering around a lot in these few sections of the game where there's some puzzle elements and you can rotate the environment. That's the gameplay mechanic that is much different from any other Shantae game. This fundamentally plays exactly the same as all of the other releases in terms of how Shantae handles her different transformations, which are activated by dancing, the different items and sub-weapons or spells, whatever you want to call them. And those aspects of the game are very similar to the other Shantae games, even the more recent ones. But this Tremor Engine thing, I really didn't like it very much. And my first time playing it on Game Boy Advance, there were a few times where I got really confused navigating these areas. And while the game definitely supplies you with adequate information, so you always know where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do, it's the execution part of what you're supposed to do that can be a bit confusing. Now, thankfully, there's plenty of walkthroughs out there since the game was already released on Game Boy Advance, so if you get stuck, you can always look it up. But I'm not the type that likes to have to look something up, and if I get really stumped on something and I have to look it up, it kind of takes me right out of the game, and that happened twice here with the second and third areas, which I found very confusing to navigate. Sequin Land is every bit as charming and entertaining as it is in other games. with plenty of NPCs that'll give you hints or some side quests. There's hidden collectibles throughout the game. There's a shop that's manned by Roddy Tops. Now, something that I haven't mentioned yet is that this is the modern version of Shantae Risky's Revolution. So exactly what does that bring to the table compared to the original Game Boy Advance release? Well, quite a bit actually. First, it does include in its entirety the Game Boy Advance version. So it basically just plays like if you were playing the ROM on an emulator. You could play it exactly the same way as it played several months ago when it released. It also includes a 2 to 4 player versus mode, which is a first for the series. I didn't have anybody to try this with, so I'm just going to move past that and gloss over it since I had no way of trying it. And then of course there is the modern version. Now, something that I kind of want to complain about is that there are two digital versions of this game. There's the regular version and then there's the deluxe version, which includes 3 additional costumes for Shantae that aren't included in the base version. Now, if you buy the physical release from Limited Run, you are getting the deluxe edition, which includes these costumes, but it feels a bit weird for a Game Boy Advance release to be charging you extra for 3 costumes. And while these all look very nice and I did use one of them, you can only use one at a time per playthrough. And this is one of my complaints, since if you do buy the costumes, they're extra money. You can't switch when you select your save file, you can't switch on the fly, so whichever costume you pick, you're stuck with for the entirety of the playthrough. This seems like a missed opportunity to allow you to use the costumes at your leisure. Switch it up, mix it up. Not everybody is going to play through this game 3 or even 4 times to use the 4 different available costumes. It seems like a weird choice, I don't like it. Hopefully they can adjust that and at least allow you to pick which costume you're going to wear when you load your save file. Yeah, they give you some buffs, but this seems like quite the oversight for something that costs some extra money. To get back to the modern version, the main upgrade to this version over the Game Boy Advance release is just the visuals and the art for the dialogue scenes, the menus, and the heads-up display. There's some additional art here, and if you're a fan of the Shantae series, you know how important the art is to the experience, and playing the modern version is way better than just playing the Game Boy Advance release, because there the art's all pixely, and here it's all crisp, clean, it's beautiful. So to me, the modern version is absolutely how you should play this game if you're playing it for the first time. That's really the only difference though. Fundamentally, this is the exact same game. It plays the same, it looks the same. Just what I mentioned now is the only key difference. The music is pretty good, and while I was always really accustomed to the soundtracks from Jake Kaufman, I do think that Maddie Lim did a great job with this release, and it all felt appropriate for each of the areas and the series as a whole. I think they did a great job stepping in for such a beloved composer on such a beloved IP. The music here is really good. Chef's kiss. There is some exploration throughout the game. You're going to have quite a bit of variety to the enemies. There's some pretty fun boss fights, but if you use one of those bonus costumes like I did, they absolutely trivialize some of the difficulty in the first few bosses. Not so much the final boss, which I won't show, but the Relic Hunter bosses, oof. I beat some of these in like 20 seconds by just spamming one of my spells. So if you want an authentic difficulty, do not use this costume that I'm using here and the Cloud Puff, because you will melt the bosses. I think overall Shantae Advance is a really enjoyable game, and it fell somewhere in the middle of my expectations. It obviously wasn't as good to me as the more recent Shantae games, as it does lack some of the mechanics that I appreciate in Metroidvania style games, like a map for example, or maybe even a quest log or some sort of tracking. It does have a basic inventory screen, but it also exceeded my expectations in that I expected it to feel a little bit out of date, but thankfully it doesn't. And if this is going to be your first time diving into the game, I think you're absolutely gonna love it. I don't have any other complaints other than the way the world shapeshifts. It's always providing you with plenty of hints so you know where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do. The transformations are really fun to use, and you get a whole bunch of them and upgrades associated with them. The game took me between 5 and 6 hours to play all the way through. I will most likely go back and play it again because, like all other Shantae games, you get different art at the end depending on how fast you did it, what your completion percentage was. So since I love the Shantae art so much so that I actually have the art book and some of the other comics of the Shantae series that released from Odon, I gotta get back to it and get the rest of that art, huh? I gotta get back to it. But this is one of those games I can easily recommend. If you're getting the physical edition from Limited Run and you're okay waiting, that will include the bonus costumes. If you're getting it digitally, just understand that they are a few extra dollars to get those costumes, which again, not really great in my opinion. But anyways, this was my first review for a Shantae game. I hope that you enjoyed it. I tried to summarize the best I could how we got to this point. Since this game was on the shelf for over 20 years, it is pretty amazing that it did finally release. So I had a lot of fun playing it. I hope you will too. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click the bell icon for notification. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.